In London, Mr. Depp was filming with Paul Bettany. He missed a few days of work, going on a multi-day drug binge. And that's when he told Miss Heard that if she accepted an invitation and went to a concert with a friend that she was starring in a movie with, that the engagement would be off. Talk about coercive control that Don Hughes testified is abuse. That is abuse. And there's been a lot mentioned in this case by Mr. Depp about Miss Heard not wanting him to leave. Miss Heard not wanting him to leave. Well, this is why she didn't want him to leave, because he goes off with his friends and he twists off, as he calls it, and goes on a multi-day bender. That's why she didn't want him to leave when he got spun up like that and she could see the monster coming. So let's fast forward to the Boston plane incident. Mr. Depp was jealous that she was filming a movie with James Franco. And Miss Heard testified that when she met him in Boston, she was on the plane, his car pulled up, she could guess by the way he was moving, she knew what was going to board that plane. And it wasn't Mr. Depp, the man, it was Mr. Depp, the monster. She said, I already know he's drunk, I already know he's using. And then when he got on the plane, he straight up started taunting her. He called her a go-getter and a slut. He started throwing things at her, ice cubes and utensils, and he slapped her face against the window when she was seated. And when she got up to move, how dare she, he kicked her in the back. She said, I feel this boot in my back. And he continued to drink and eventually started howling like an animal, passed out in the bathroom. Let's play 221, please. That's Mr. Depp on the plane, but he expects you to believe him that he didn't have anything to drink on that plane except for maybe one thing of champagne. That's what he expects you to believe. He's talked about blackouts. These blackouts where he doesn't remember what happened. He blamed them only on opiates, but we know they happen throughout, where he doesn't remember what's happened. As you're weighing the evidence, as you're assessing whether Mr. Depp has borne his burden of proof, think to yourself, do you believe Amber's account of what happened on the plane, or do you believe that person's account that you just heard? But actually, you can look at his account from a few days later, May 30th, in which he told, again, Paul Bettany, he said, drank all night before I picked Amber up to fly to LA. No food for days, powders, half a bottle of whiskey, 1,000 Red Bulls and vodkas, pills, 2 bottles of champagne, and what do you get? An angry aggro engine in a fucking blackout, screaming obscenities and insulting any fuck who got near. I'm done. I'm admittedly too fucked in the head to spray my rage at the one I love. For little reason as well, I'm too old to be that guy, but pills are fine. And he expects you to believe that he's carried his burden of proof in showing that no abuse happened on that plane. You don't have to look at just that. You can look at this text to Patti Smith when he says, when I was in NYC, they were brief visits, and I fucked and charged by horrific fights with Amber. I fucked up and drank and got shitty, was so disappointed in myself. You can look at his text to Miss Heard the next day, where he says, once again, I find myself in a place of shame and regret. Of course, I am sorry. I really don't know why or what happened. Well, no wonder. You heard the voice on the plane. Of course he doesn't know what happened. But I will never do it again. My illness somehow crept up and grabbed me. I must get better. I love you and feel so bad for letting you down. And what his response has been throughout this trial to things like that is blaming Amber, saying he's just placating her. Is that carrying his burden of proof and showing that abuse hasn't happened even a single time? This is in the lead up to Australia, but before we get there, we can talk about January 25th in Tokyo at the premiere of Mordecai, where he did slam her up against the hallway wall, wailed on her, and he did get on her back in the closet. And what do they say? Look at her backless dress. She doesn't have any bruises. She testified herself that she was checking out pictures because she was concerned that there were. So now their theory is if there's no marks, it didn't happen. We all know that's not the case. February 2015, this is when they got married. The day they got married, you heard the testimony from Io Tillett, right? That where Mr. Depp told him, I can now punch her anytime I want and no one can do anything about it. He'll say it's a joke he made on his wedding day. Then we fast forward to Australia, where Miss Heard is flying from London, where she's filming The Danish Girl, to see her new husband for the first time since their wedding. And these are excerpts from DX353. All but the bottom right one are in the days leading up to this, where he's on a drug-fueled bender. He's hanging out with Marilyn Manson. He's getting drugs from his assistants, who are enablers. Again, there's a reason you didn't hear them testify in this trial. They're getting him drugs for days and days. And then the one on the bottom right, you'll remember you've seen a couple times. This is after he chopped his finger off, when he says, need more cocaine and ecstasy. So, and no one, Miss Heard was in touch with his assistants, but no one told her the hornet's nest that she was walking into. And we all know what happened in Australia. We all know that Mr. Depp, she gets there, he pulls out a bag of MDMA, and he took a handful. She didn't say he took 10 at a time. She did say he took 8 to 10 over the course of that period. The second day, Mr. Depp, who claims that Miss Heard refused to do a post-nup, calls Amber's domestic relations attorney, Michelle Mulrooney. You heard from her, when he was drunk, and he fired her. And he told Amber, for about the 25th time, she said, the only way out of this is death. I don't want a post-nup. And then she said she remembered him slamming up against the wall. And I won't go through, you remember her testimony from Australia. You remember her saying that he had her by the neck, squeezing her neck. You remember her saying that he threw her on the games table like a ping pong table. You remember seeing the pictures of that broken table. You remember her saying that at some point he had a broken bottle up against her face, and he told her that he'd carve up her face, that he was throwing bottles at her. He's throwing bottles one after another, and I could feel glass breaking behind me, and you've seen the evidence of that. And he was just over and over again smashing the phone into the wall, screaming at me as she watched it break into pieces. Now, she doesn't know how he lost his finger. She said that she saw him smash a phone to pieces, and you heard him get impeached the other day with his testimony from the UK, which was different from what he testified here, where he said he did smash a phone. And then they tried to put that picture in front of you with a desk phone and suggest that that was it. It's deception. They're trying to deceive you. And then you heard Miss Heard testify that the next morning she found meat that he had left all over the house. But not before what happened before she went to bed that night. Where Miss Heard testified, and I remember trying to get up, and I was slipping on the glass. I was wanting to move. I felt this pressure in my pubic bone. I remember just not wanting to move because I didn't know if it was broken. I didn't know if the bottle that he had inside me was broken. This is the next morning. This is what he wrote with the bloody stump of his finger. And there's been testimony about what happened to cut the finger off, but frankly, it's irrelevant to your deliberations here. Amber could have chopped it off with an axe, and it has nothing to do with whether or not Mr. Depp abused her. But we all know she didn't. We all know that his fingers weren't curled, and someone was standing with a half-gallon vodka bottle from about where that canopy is, and threw it, and it somehow managed to damage just the bottom of the finger and leave the nail fully intact. We all know that didn't happen. Mr. Depp knows it didn't happen, and we'll see some evidence of that. But here, he writes about her ambition, starring Billy Bob and Easy Amber, who talked about controlling, jealousy, talked about him not wanting her to act. Dawn Hughes testified how that is a form of intimate partner abuse. Here he's writing on the mirror again, and they try to blame her and say that she wrote Call Carly Simon. She didn't write that. Who was the lunatic in the house? Who was writing everywhere? There's no evidence she wrote that. She testified she doesn't even know who Carly Simon was until she was told. This is some of the evidence. Mr. Depp told you a couple different stories the other day about the evidence on the right. He claimed that that was the handle of vodka between those two beer cans there. But then under cross-examination, he admitted it's not, that there's not enough glass on the floor, that there's no handle of vodka on the floor. But what there is in the picture on the right is evidence of when he was throwing bottles past Amber's head and breaking that plate glass window. More writing. More abuse on the right. Imagining having a painting area where you're drawing two canvases and you and your husband get in a fight, and while you are asleep that night, he takes the bloody stump of his finger and dips it in paint and destroys your paintings. Ladies and gentlemen, that's abuse. Good luck and be careful at the top. And this is a good chance to talk about Mr. Depp's controlling and jealous rage and his desire to control Amber's career. He didn't want her to act. As early as 2013, he tells his sister, I don't need actress bullshit and her fucking ambition. He tells her in this recording,
if you look at the bigger picture, what is it? I become irrational when you're doing movies. I become jealous and fucking crazy and weird, and we fight a lot more.
I become jealous when you're doing movies. I become irrational and fucking crazy and weird. Out of his own mouth. This is some of the notes of Dr. Blaustein, his therapist. Called him self-destructive. Something about wait up to fight the devil. Jealous. And I know this is hard to read, but you can see jealous. You can see paranoia, fear, envy. He wanted to control her. He wanted to own her. He didn't want her to have any career. And then he says things like, I have other uses for your throat, which do not include injury. No one who hasn't previously grabbed someone by the throat would write, which do not include injury. But we all know how Mr. Depp thinks along these lines, because you saw these two texts the other day that he sat on the stand and denied writing. And I'm not going to read them to you again, because they're the most vulgar, vile writing you can imagine. He said, that's not my style. I wouldn't write like that. Of course he would. And he did. These are texts that he produced, that he gave to Amber and our team in this litigation, from him to his personal assistant, Stephen Deuters. This is the way he thinks about women. This. Not what you heard on the stand. That. It's disgusting. He admitted that he cut his finger off. This is evidence of him admitting to it to people other than Amber. I cut the top of my middle finger off. Says that to Dr. Kipper. Says it again to Dr. Kipper. The bottom one he says to Nurse Velati. I just chopped my finger off. But he does say it to Amber too. Remember, we played this one 4 times, and Mr. Depp denied that he was actually saying the day that I chopped my finger off. Let's hear it one more time.
I don't know.
I'm talking about Australia, the day that
now we're talking about Australia. Okay.
The day that I chopped my finger off. So let's fast forward to March 23rd, 2015. After just a few weeks in Australia, Mr. Depp has a finger injury, no doubt about that. He comes home. He gets what they call a soft cast on it, which you heard his treating physician and our experts say it doesn't have sides on it, but it's a hard plaster cast over the top of his finger that can be wielded like a club. And they got in an argument when Miss Heard discovered that he was having an affair with a woman named Rochelle that had been going on before the wedding, after the wedding, and she confronted him about that. No surprise there, they got in a huge argument. At some point in the argument, he bolted up the stairs. Now, Travis McGivern claims that she threw a Red Bull can at him. She and Whitney Enriquez say that absolutely didn't happen. But even if you believe Mr. McGivern, at some point, Mr. Depp went up the stairs. He went to the fight. This is the man that claims he always wants to run, and this time he had his bodyguard with him. So he could have just walked out the door, but he runs up the stairs, and Miss Enriquez is standing on the precipice of the stairs, and Amber admitted that when she thought he was about to push her down the stairs, as he's grabbing at her and Amber with his free hand and trying to club them with the casted hand, that she said, I punched him square in the face. I punched him square in the face. And they showed you a picture of the shiner that she had, that Mr. Depp had. Miss Heard doesn't deny that. They're trying to say she's the abuser for defending herself and her sister from this animal who's running at them. This person that they claim couldn't possibly have done this because he had a hurt finger. Yet he could have done this. This is what Mr. McGivern said was rearranging her closet. I don't know what you all do when you rearrange your closets, but I hope it doesn't look like this. This is throwing a clothing rack down the stairs. This is knocking this over. This is what he did to rearrange her closet with his hurt finger that he couldn't possibly have hit Miss Heard with, they claim. That in and of itself, that destruction of property, even if he hadn't hit her that night, that's abuse. Imagine being married to someone and walking on eggshells so thick that you don't know if you set them off if that's what's going to happen. That's abuse. And it's disgusting. But sometimes he would apologize. He'd say, I can't express how sorry I am for having stooped so low as to have spewed such vicious untruths for the sole purpose of hurting you. Grievous error, shameful. So he went in these cycles. She thought he could change for good. And when it was good, it was really good. But then sometimes things like December 15th came around, where she remembers him chasing her in the kitchen. She remembers him shoving her 2 or 3 times and sending her toppling over a Chase lounge and saying, do you really want to go again, tough guy? And she looked at him and he balled up his fist, leaned back, and headbutted her square in the nose and pounded her head with the back of his fist so she couldn't breathe on that bed that we're going to see in a second, where she was suffocating in this pillow top. And she said, this is when I thought I was going to die. He's going to kill me, and he doesn't even know what he's doing because he's out of his mind. And these are the pictures that they claim. I don't know what they're claiming. I don't know if they're claiming she painted on the bruise. Oh, you weren't hurt badly enough, so therefore you're making it up? Look under her eye. And again, their theory is that all of this is a lie. All of this was some grand hoax. If this were a hoax, ladies and gentlemen, she'd have worse injuries than that. She'd really do it up. She took pictures as they existed when she could at the time of abuse. And yet Ms. Vasquez has the nerve to say, well, why didn't she videotape an incident of abuse? What, if she's being hit, she's supposed to somehow grab a video camera with one hand while she's defending herself with another hand? You heard her in one of the audio tapes talking about when she hit him as he was trying to barge at her and she got her feet caught under a door as he's coming after her. And of course, as Don Hughes testified to, victims of coercive control like this, they do try to appease their abusive partner and apologize for things that aren't their fault. So as you're coming at me, Johnny, and you push a door into me, and I have to hit you to get away, to protect myself, yeah, she did apologize for that because that's the cycle of violence. That's what victims do. Yet they continue to blame the victim. There's no evidence she painted on that bloody lip. And again, if we're talking about a hoax, the next day she went on James Corden and they say, well, you can't see any injury there, so it must not have happened. She would have to be the dumbest person in the world to say, I'm going to commit an abuse hoax, but let's do it the day before I go on national television. Let's do it the day before. But you heard Melanie Iglesias, her makeup artist, testify in great detail, and I didn't even understand half the terms about makeup that she was using, but she testified in great detail about exactly what she did to cover up those bruises. The red lipstick that she put to cover up the busted lip. You heard the testimony of that from a neutral party who said exactly what she did. She talked about how she looked at the color wheel to neutralize the bruising. They claim it was just an accidental headbutt. Well, no accidental headbutt rips out hair. They claim, oh, Miss Heard somehow used a pocket knife to cut this portion of the bed out to stage this. Well, I don't know if that's a pocket knife or not, but the only testimony in this trial about a pocket knife is Whitney Henriquez saying that Mr. Depp carried a pocket knife in his pocket every day. We all know where that, if it is a pocket knife, where that came from. I think one of the most telling things about this incident is the text he sent to David Heard, Amber's dad, 2 weeks later, where he says, I meant to send this to you a week or so ago. I'm sending it to you now. And he says, I forget if it's a text or an email, but you can look at DX580. He says, yes, I fucked up and went too far in our fight. Because as a result of that fight and the bruises that all of her family saw, the family refused to go to the Bahamas with them for Christmas. The family refused to go to the Bahamas for Christmas, and on that trip to the island, Mr. Depp kept passing out, and every time he passed out, he would dump a glass of wine on Amber's lap. And she didn't like that, and she yelled at him. And because it was in front of his kids, he got up, This is the one where Tara Roberts took the video, but she didn't show you the closet, she didn't show you the bathroom. And Amber says, while holding my neck, this is in the closet, he said, I'll fucking kill you if you ever speak to me like that in front of my kids again because you embarrass me. And then he took her into the bathroom, and she said, but this time, he grabbed my vagina, shoved his fingers inside me, but through my bathing suit, and held me there and asked me if I was so fucking tough. And then she ran out of the house. And to keep him away from her, that's when he claims, and she admits she threw something at him. She didn't know what it was. It's been testimony it was a can of mineral spirits that she claimed that hit Mr. Depp. And Mr. Depp is somehow the victim in that encounter? Come on. We talk about the train ride to Asia. You saw the pictures taken before they got on the train ride where Mr. Depp has the same shadowing under his eye that he does in the allegedly abusive picture. But in that picture, he held in that train ride, talk about a honeymoon, he held her up against the wall while she was trying to get his arms off her neck, and he was squeezing her neck against the railway car, and at some point, I pulled the lapel of his shirt, he rips the shirt off, and she woke up with the shirt around her neck and a giant knot in the back of her head. Let's fast forward to her birthday party just very quickly. He experienced terrible financial news that night. He came over, they got into a fight. There's been conflicting evidence about that. But Amber said, I hit the side of the desk, he chest bumped me, he fell to the floor, I fell to the floor, and when I got back up, he held me down by the shoulders, and that's when he grabbed her by the pubic bone and pushed her down. And you'll remember Ms. Vasquez showing her interrogatory answers where she details a lot of this and saying, nowhere in there does it say that. And Ms. Hurd says, it actually does on page 64. And pointed out to Ms. Vasquez exactly where it says that. That's abuse. It's sexual abuse.